and welcome to the New World Review. I'm Grandline Waifu, and today we're all about those poor choices. My poor choices, your poor choices, their poor choices. I have no idea if you've made poor choices, but you know, no one's perfect, so let's talk about choices, shall we? Knuckle not allowing Shoot the freedom to give his life to the cause resulted in two problems when I think about it. The first one is that Knuckle is putting the plan at risk and going very steeply off course in a way that could get Shoot killed anyway. Secondly, the fact that Shoot has reached his pinnacle as a person and feels amazing about this decision has now been stolen. If something happens to Knuckle as a result of his own failure to abide by the plan, Shoot will be damned to a life, like a short life in fairness, but a life of guilt and self-doubt. Of course, I'm not saying it's good that he's feeling particularly suicidal, but in a world where he's in a life or death situation, feeling okay with the death part seems pretty good for mental self-preservation. There are a lot of negative things I want to say to Knuckle that aren't necessarily fair, but go something like this. Back off, dude. Don't be so selfish. There are more important things at stake, more egos to stroke, and more needs to fill than your self-aggrandizing, selfish need for everything powerful or good in the world to focus on you. In the worst possible way, your inability to manage your emotions and ego could literally bring about the end of the world. Follow the damn plan. If a couple of teenagers can do it in the face of huge doubt, it's not too much to ask that you do it too. Which brings me to a new question. Who decides which abilities a NEN user gets? I know they can try to build around a concept, but beyond that? Because realistically, Knuckle is sort of like Cheetu. All he has to do is not let his opponent touch him, and he can't even do that. It's an odd comparison to make, but it just annoys me so much when characters who should be capable of levels of behavior don't display it. In this moment, I felt grateful to and impressed by Shoot stepping up as a personal member of Clan Human. If all Knuckle saw was his weakness and that he would eventually fall, it says more about Knuckle than Shoot, who has clearly reached the pinnacle of his ability and was prepared to do what needed to be done for something greater than he. I'm glad he's alive, don't get me wrong, but I'm annoyed by Knuckle's interference in this moment, which is, coincidentally, exactly what Killua didn't do, right? Gon is still in Death Monster mode. He's locked onto his external Gon, and that Killua is scared for his friends says he clearly hasn't been paying attention to now, because what I see is the inside Gon coming out, and I'm impressed he held it in so long. Not only that, but looking back, I'm honestly kind of surprised that he's throwing this sort of rage, revenge, monstrosity type being at someone because of what they did to someone else he met and vaguely got to know as a friend of his dad's a few weeks back. I don't know that Kite, kind and thoughtful though he was, is worth this level of anger. More than that, like with Knuckle and Shoot, I don't think Kite would appreciate that Gon has turned into this monster in revenge. It's another case of selfishness when you think about it. Interestingly, it does probably bring him closer to the person his dad wants him to be, given his dad only wanted to meet him if he turned up alone, but still, is Kite specifically worth this level of revenge? In some ways, as the pinnacle of goodness that we have as in hunters to this point, yeah, sure. Absolutely. But in others and more ways, more practical ways, no. If Killua died, I would expect this. I would expect a rampage because Killua is Gon's property, more or less. Kite? I guess Kite belongs to his father if we want to look at it in the same way, but it still doesn't hold enough weight for me. Maybe I wasn't invested enough in the relationship that formed, or maybe it's the fact that Kite's name hasn't even been mentioned as the reason for Gon's rage for 10 episodes or so, if not more. How we talk about things tells us a lot about how we feel about them, and the absence of talk also says something. If this were truly for Kite, someone would have mentioned it. Trained or not, he's a teenager. Focused or not, after this I wouldn't be surprised to find out that Gon's the next big bad. Even an image of Kite, you know, like, I'm still thinking about this, even an image, a flash of remembrance, anything to show us that there is an emotional center to Gon's blankness, and we don't get it, and he didn't even consider Killua when Killua split up. Friendship here to Gon means nothing. If Killua gets in the way, I actually expect Killua probably to be a casualty or close to. So why Kite? I don't think it makes sense enough to do it this way. Or at least I don't think it was defined enough or put into place strongly enough to be worth this. And of course, Killua as a character is far too human, despite his weird stabby hands that make him distinctly not human, to sink to Gon's depths. But let's see what happens in episode 115. Episode 115, and Kite has been mentioned by the narrator, but by this point I'm even less convinced that Gon is trying to save Kite or avenge him in any way. I'm not sure why I'm so distrustful of Gon's motivations. Could it be the fact that he left a friend to his fate? That he didn't care at all what happened to Killua? Yes, we could argue that he trusted his friend to be capable of looking after himself, but it doesn't look like he even spared a thought for the poor kid who gets soft-eyed and concerned whenever he's around. Not in the same way that Icalgo does. We'll get to Icalgo. I'll be back. Hold on there, Octo Buddy. I'm coming for you. Not to mention that same kid who's supposed to be a friend has found his grandfather not asked questions he should have and has been noted by that same granddad to have changed significantly since he's left home. It's Killua. I'm talking about Killua. Killua needs more attention than he's getting from Gon. Specifically, Gon needs to take a look at Killua. Gon needs to take a look at Gon. Gon needs to just like, stop. Hammer time. Just stop. Dude. No, in fact, no hammer time. No hammer time for you. Let's look at Killua. His eyes have depth to them now that they didn't have before, and I guess that's what the point of the kind of creepily, overly realistic eyes that were in frame. They weren't creepy, but like, given it was animated, it just felt like it was too much detail. Gon doesn't care. Gon is angry and has found the source of his anger, which is all that matters to him. There's nothing Pito will be able to do to stop him, and if Killua doesn't do something to stop Gon, little Queenie there will definitely die. Maybe they could strike a deal instead. Get Grandpa and his Dragon Balls involved, maybe? Meanwhile, Knuckle decides to play cat and mouse with a wacky inflatable flailing arm man with extra eyes, and not only do I think that was an awful idea, but I'm not sure exactly what he stands to gain from having done that. Since both characters are absurd with their every little helps mentality, it's not that every little doesn't help, but if that's the best he had, my grumpy rant from the last episode grows only grumpier, because it becomes even less likely that anything useful will come of the interaction. Stepping back and looking at it as a whole, I found this episode to be a little bit too scattered for my liking, and honestly the last one as well. As much as I like to know what everyone's doing at any given time, and I do enjoy knowing how the times mesh together, it can become too fiddly after a while to deal with that fact without becoming cluttered, and I think this was the point at which the story needed to find a very specific important thread and hone in on it. Arguably, that's the Wolfie Boy arc that we've been brewing for a while, and it's nice to have side stories that can complicate matters, but Togashi is fantastic at complicating matters without cleaning up threads. For example, what happened to the Phantom Troop, or Kite's annoying team, or Colt's strange baby, or Piggy. There's a lot that Togashi gets briefly involved in before getting distracted, and I get it. I'm also highly distractible, but sometimes I feel like he needs someone, you know, an actual editor perhaps, to say no more Gon till you finish your Kurapika or something, because with so much open, it's possibly why I've struggled to connect and invest in Gon's motivations if they're not intended to be an arc of how to become a full-time monster. Wolf Boy is a similar situation. His sudden existential crisis was relatable, but the fact was that it felt contrived because Togashi wrote himself into a corner. Icalgo and that other bro can fight it out, and either one could conceivably survive while keeping the story narratively interesting. If Icalgo and Wolfin about cross paths, Icalgo would lose immediately, and while it would be a big outcome, it wouldn't be narratively interesting because we know what their abilities are from a survivalist perspective. So Wolfin had to have an epiphany rather than smelling Octobuddy, which he most certainly should have been able to do given his level of paranoia and scenting, even without the realization that Hagia was the wrong name. On that, I was pleasantly surprised to find that despite my obvious difficulty with names, as soon as Octobuddy said Hagia, I was waiting to see if they would notice the inconsistency. Having something pointed out and signposted so clearly meant that I could easily follow that point, and I kind of wish some of the other points were that clearly signposted in some way. Not so that I get there before the characters do, but so that I get there at the same time as them. It's a very careful balance to run, and I was only a few beats ahead, which meant I got to enjoy the realization that actually his name's Leo. I got to have that realization at the same time. That kind of serendipity is a technical craft, and one that Hunter x Hunter seems to struggle with at times. Either we get too much information and the story gets bogged down, or we don't get enough and things come out of nowhere, or out of a chunk of information that was given in long-form prose, episodes and episodes. Points once we got through that awkward moment go to Wolf Boy for literally having paranoia as his Nen attack, but I'm not sure I'm happy with the amount of narrating that needed to be done to set the imagery up. There's a lot of telling rather than showing. That said, I like the premise and actually seeing Wolf Dude do something nenny, which I don't feel like I've seen before. And now we get to the MVP of the episode, which was truly Melioron? Camelon's butt was the MVP of this episode as he power walked his way through the palace. Of all the arcs in play at this point in time, it's that Chameleon arc that's given me sweet tension, and I'm finding myself leaning more and more heavily on the storytelling involved in his journey than anyone else is. Besides, it's hilarious seeing a panicked chameleon in a tracksuit power walking. I don't know, it's one of those innately amusing things, and I didn't realize it was something I needed in my life until, when I saw it. Overall, these episodes showed the highs and lows of the arc, which of course makes sense. You need to drip tension and ooze it out and let it go in order to raise it. You can't keep people constantly high or they'll make their own fun and start laughing at things you don't want them to. My problem with right now is that in choosing where to drop the tension, Togashi seems to forget that by jumping from scene to scene, he's actually trying to prop the tension up and then complicating matters. Light and color can only be interesting for so long before it becomes a wash. So I'm hoping that in the next episode, we actually get to stay in one place with our primary protagonist for a bit. To see if that's the case, I need to finish up here and drink this smoothie. So that's it from me. If you enjoyed this casual ramble, click here, here, and here, maybe over here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.